In this tutorial, we're going to take a look at the various ways that we can go about editing our audio within Studio One. Now, before we get started, I just wanted to mention that I do offer one-on-one training. So if you'd like to speed up your learning curve with Studio One, or if you're having any technical issues that you just can't seem to resolve on your own, definitely check out the information in the description of this video or the pinned comment below. And with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get some audio into here because we need an audio file to work with. So we'll come to the Loops tab and I'm going to drag this into the Arrange view. I'm going to hold Shift and E to make this a little bit larger as well. Now, before we get into the editing, let's come to the Start page because I want to mention something that's important here. When we create our new song, if we come over to the Settings area and scroll down a bit, if you're not seeing this, then just click on this arrow here. At the very bottom, we have this stretch audio files to tempo, and I'm not sure if this is on by default or not, but if this is checked and you import an audio file into Studio One, that file is going to be stretched to your current song tempo. Studio One defaults to 120, so if there is BPM data embedded in your audio file, it is going to be stretched. So that's something important to be aware of when you're working with audio in Studio One. Now, what this means is that if I come to the inspector here, we can see that for this audio track, the one that I just imported, at the top we have time stretch. And let's actually close out well, here in the browser with this selected, we can see that the BPM for this audio file that I brought in is 132. So this is actually being stretched to our tempo of 120. If I click, hold, and drag this down, we can see our file is then adapting to the change of the tempo here. Now, if I were to come here and turn this off and choose Don't Follow, we can see that that file changes and is no longer being stretched. So this is an important thing to be aware of if you're bringing in files and Studio One's doing something to it like this, then now you know how to correct that. Let's change our tempo back to 120. And I'd like to say that when we're working with audio within Studio One, I don't really think of the audio event that we see in the Arrange view as the actual audio file, but more of a representation of the original audio. And when we select the audio event, we can see this light blue frame surrounding it. And I think of this as kind of like a window of what is going to play back from our audio. So if I were to come to the edge, I can click, hold, and drag and pull this in. Then of course we're not going to hear any of the audio that has been removed here. So this is shorter than it was than we brought in, but let's come to the browser and let's come to the Pull tab. This is the original audio file that we brought in. Now its length is not changed at all because this is just a representation of this audio file. So the actions that we perform when we're editing our audio are non-destructive and they're not really affecting our original audio file. Now, if we were to export this as an audio file, then our changes will be applied to that bounce down audio. But what we do here within the Arrange view and in the editor is not really affecting our original audio file. That's just something important to keep in mind. So our actions are non-destructive. Now let's go ahead and pull this back out, and you can see if you need to adjust, just come to the edge. You have the double arrows and you can click, hold, and drag. Now up at the top right and left corners, we have these handles. When it's selected, you can see those more clearly. So we can come, the arrow changes to a pointer finger, and we can introduce a fade in at the front. We can also introduce a fade out at the back here. Now we can also introduce a curve to this fade out or fade in. So we have this handle in the center, and if I click, hold, and drag down, then we're introducing an exponential fade out. Coming up to the top, we can introduce a logarithmic fade out. Let's go ahead and take that back out. Now in the center, we have a handle that we can click, hold, and drag. If we pull this down, then we're taking the gain for this audio down. So we're taking that level down. If we come up, then we are increasing the level. Now, if I hold Control and click on this handle, then it's going to take it back to the default of 0 dB. And these adjustments that we're making tie in with different controls within the inspector. So let's click on the eye here, and then the bottom panel, let's go ahead and pull this up so we can see all of this. So we can see here we have our gain, fade in, and fade out. So if we wanted to be more precise and maybe put a value in for seconds for the fade in, so if I put in 3 and go ahead and click out to accept that, then we can see we have a 3-second fade in that's been introduced. Now we can also click, hold, and drag up and down here. Let's click once and put 0 back in. And we can do that for our fade out. Now here's our gain. So if I put in -5, let's press enter. Now we can see that our gain has been reduced by 5 dB for our audio event. Now let's actually bring in another audio file. I'll come to the files and let's drag this in, close out our browser, and we'll zoom out a little bit. I'll click, hold, and drag in the ruler and just drag up, maybe a bit more, so we can see the full length of our audio file. Now with this audio event selected, I can press Alt and N, and that's going to normalize our audio. So basically it's going to take the highest peaks that we have and take that up to 0 dB. So if I again do Alt and N, that's going to toggle that back off. If we'd like to reverse the audio, we can use the shortcut key Control and R. So now this is going to be playing back in reverse. I really love reverse. It's one of my favorite things. Let's Control R again to take that off. Now, if we Control M as in Mary, then this is going to open up our audio event within Melodyne. And this is going to be available in the professional version of Studio One. So if you're using Artist or Producer, I forget what they call it, or Prime, the free version, the Melodyne is not going to be available to you. There's a 30-day trial for Melodyne in the Artist or Producer, but it's not available in Prime. So just be aware of that. But if we scroll down in our arrange view, we can see that we have an indication that Melodyne has been applied here. Now we can Control Alt and M to take Melodyne off. Let's close out our edit window. And anytime that we'd like to work with our audio in the edit window, we can just double click on that. And if you'd like, you can click on the upward facing arrow here to detach that and then move it to a second monitor, and then we have a full screen view that we can make use of. But for this tutorial, we can reattach by clicking the downward facing arrow. We'll close that out. For this tutorial, we'll just work with our audio in the arrange view here because we're going to work with a couple of different files here. Now for the normalized reverse audio edit with Melodyne, also keep in mind that we can right click and we can then come to the audio section here, and you can see we can access them in this contextual menu as well. Now, when we right-click on an audio event, we have a few options up at the top here. So we can see the file tempo. This is embedded within this audio event here, and we can change that. We also have speed up. So let's actually solo this audio event or this track here and play this back. Okay, so we'll right-click again, and then for the speed up, if I were to put in 0.5, then this is going to play back at half the speed. Okay, and there's some settings to be aware of for this when we're stretching our audio. So in the inspector, let's pull this back down at the top. We can see we have time stretch, and then we have time stretch mode. So by default, this is going to be on drums, and that works for this audio event. But if you're using something like a vocal or a guitar, then you may want to try sound or solo, one of these other options here. And then we have tape resampler, which is going to function more like a traditional sampler. When you play higher pitches, it's going to speed up and the pitch is going to go up. If you play slower, or if you stretch the file, then it's going to play back slower and the pitch is going to go down. So you can always experiment with these different modes here. Let's right click again, and we will double click and put this back to 1. We then have transpose. So if we double click here and let's just put in 5, this is in semitones. We'll go ahead and enter to accept that, and let's play this back. Okay, and this can be a bit more obvious for vocals. So let's do this to our narration here. We'll transpose this by 5. Let's enter to accept that.
Our individual channels can be soloed.
Okay, we'll go ahead and put this back to 0. We also have tune, and this is going to be in cents. Next, we have bend marker. So if we're going to work with bend markers, then we can go ahead and check this box here, and that's going to change the view and make our bend markers visible. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. We then have a gain envelope. So if I click once in this checkbox, just take note of how our audio event looks now. And then once I select this box, we can see we have a horizontal white line that's through here. Now, when we hover on that line, our arrow changes to a pointer finger. So then I can click once to add a point here, another one here, and here. And so then when we hover on a point and click, hold, and drag, we can then adjust the gain for very specific areas of our audio. And then when we come to the center area, we have these points that pop up, and then we can grab these and introduce a curve. If we come to the top of our audio event, we see we have this trim tool that becomes active, and then I can click, hold, and drag and push this down or pull it up like so. Let's double click on these points to take them out. Now, if we take a look at the inspector, we can see that as with the gain and fade in and fade out, we have a checkbox for our gain envelope here. So we can show and hide that by clicking like so. Let's right click on our audio event. Now at the bottom of this top pane here, we have time lock, which is going to prevent our event from being moved. So if you want to secure its position so that it doesn't get moved as far as time is concerned, then you can check that box there. And then we have edit lock. So once we engage that, that's going to prevent our event from being edited. So if I hold Control and switch to the split tool, then we can see I'm not able to cut this event. We'll go ahead and take that off. Now by default, our arrow tool is going to have two different functions that it switches between within our arrange view. I've actually got that turned off right now. So wherever I hover, we have the arrow tool. But by default, this here is engaged. This bracket is turned on so that when we hover at the top, we have this kind of crosshair. And then once we cross the center line and come down to the bottom of our event, it switches to the arrow. And let's actually zoom out to take a better look at this. Now, this is supposed to help you with editing to move a bit more quickly. So if you wanted to move certain parts of your event, so say I'd like this portion to use it in another area of this track or the song, then at the top where we have the crosshairs, I can click, hold, and drag to select this region, and then I can come down to the bottom where the arrow is active, then I can click, hold, and drag that to another area of the track or the song. Now, also, if I have a section that I'd like to remove, say this portion here, I'll come to the top with the crosshairs and select that, then I can just press delete on the QWERTY keyboard. Now, also, while this is highlighted, I can right click and I can choose to cut and then position the playhead cursor here, and I'll Control V to paste. Now, I'm going to go ahead and turn this smart arrow feature back off for the remainder of the tutorial. And let's move on to take a look at the split tool. And just know that I've turned this off. So now we're just making use of the arrow tool wherever we hover at and click. But if you would like to access the range tool by itself, then you can click here or press 2. And then now we have the crosshairs wherever we hover. And so we can click and select regions and make use of the tool in that way. But let's go ahead and press 3 to switch to our split tool. Now, with the split tool active, as you can imagine, we can click in an area to make cuts to our audio event. And let's actually zoom in a bit because I'd like to show that our snap is going to affect the tools when we're using them. So if you see that kind of jumping or snapping to our grid, that's because our snap is engaged here and it's set to quarter notes for our quantized value. Let's click and change this to eighth notes. And then now you'll see that we are snapping to our eighth notes. So if you need to make precise cuts, then you may need to turn the snap off. You can change the quantized value, or if you turn the snap off by clicking here or pressing N as in Nancy on your QWERTY keyboard, then you can see this moves smoothly along, and then we can zoom in and make really, really precise cuts like so. Let's go ahead and undo those cuts. We next have the eraser tool, and this is just going to erase anything that you click on. We then have the mute tool. So this is going to mute our audio events. This doesn't really have to do with editing, but just so you know that it's available. Now we can also, while an event is selected, we can press Shift and M as in Mary, and that is going to mute our audio as well. Pressing Shift and M again, while it's selected, we'll toggle that back off. Now next in line, we have our bend tool. And we'll come up to our drum audio event here, our drum sample. And let's make the bend tool active. And then actually, I'll turn the snap back on as well. So now we can see we're snapping here, and I'll go ahead and click here, but we don't see anything happening. And if you remember, when we right clicked and in this top pane here, I mentioned the bend marker. If we check this box and we saw that the view kind of changes here, and once we check that, now we can see that bend marker that I added. And if we look in the inspector, we have the checkbox here for a bend marker, so we can toggle that view on and off as well. So now I can come in and click once to add our bend markers. And if you notice, this is actually showing up as red, and that's because it is being stretched. The tempo for the embedded tempo for this drum file is 132 beats per minute. Our song is 120. Okay, so if I were to, let's change the tempo from time stretch to don't follow. And now you see that red color goes away and it's going to play back at its original tempo. And we'll actually just leave that time stretch off for now because it's important so we can see the changes in color here when we're making adjustments. So if you would like to stretch or compress a certain area here, and let's play this back again. It's still in solo. Okay, so it's playing back like normal. But if I hover on one of these bend markers and click, hold, and drag to the right, we can see that the gray color is now changing to red and green here. So the red indicates that it's being stretched, the green indicates that it's being compressed. And the darker the shade of green or red, then that just represents kind of the intensity of our change here. So as we keep going, then it's going to get a darker color here. And this is getting a little bit funky here. So let's come to this marker here. So you can see as we stretch that, it gets that deeper shade of red. And let's actually play this back and hear how that sounds. Okay, so you get the idea there. Let's go ahead and undo to remove those bend markers. And we'll take the bend marker view off by coming to the inspector and deselecting that checkbox there. Now I want to go back in time a bit because we took a look at the split tool and saw that we can manually make cuts. Let's undo those. I also want to mention that we can right click on our audio event and then come to the audio section here. And actually we may need to go to the event here. So we can see that we have split at grid. So this is going to split our audio event to whatever we have our quantize value set to here. So right now that's set on eighth notes. So if I were to go ahead and split at grid and choose that, then we can see that that's split up into the eighth note subdivision there. Let's undo, and I just want to show that. Let's right click again. We'll come to the event. I added a shortcut. I don't actually know what this is called, the technical name for this, but the vertical just straight bar that's on the right hand side below backspace on the QWERTY keyboard. I've set that up as a shortcut to split at grid. So while this audio event is selected, if I press that key on my QWERTY keyboard, then we can see that that is split for me. So that's a bit more convenient. If you're going to make use of this function, then you can assign a key on your keyboard to really make that happen very quickly. And since we're backtracking a little bit, let's again activate the bend tool and go ahead and add some markers here. We'll turn that bend view back on. We also have the option to split at the areas where we have added our bend markers. So if we right click, then I believe this is in event, actually audio. We can see we have split at bend markers. So if I go ahead and select that, now we can see our audio event has been split where I added those markers. Let's turn that view back off. Now, if we'd like to duplicate our audio within Studio One, that's a pretty simple and straightforward process. We can just select our audio event and press D as in dog on our QWERTY keyboard, and then these are going to be duplicated like so. And another feature that I'd like to mention that could be useful while you're editing audio is the ripple edit. So if I were to select this event here and delete that out, then we see we have this empty space in here. But if we bring that back and turn on the ripple edit, which is here, and now I delete this out, let's select there, we can now see that the events are being pulled forward, so we don't have that empty space. So if I select this one here and delete that out, then the other one is pulled forward. Now this may be a little bit confusing because all of these look the same. So let's actually, I'm going to hold Control and let's split our narration here, and then we'll select this portion here and delete that out. We can see that these are being pulled forward. So this part here, once I delete this, is going to be pulled forward. So just know, if you're going to be doing a lot of editing with deleting parts out, you can make use of the ripple edit feature by engaging this button here. Now we've seen the bend tool and how that works, but let's actually take a look at the audio bend panel here. Now, we're just going to quickly take a look at this, and I'll do a separate video that goes over all of the functions here. But I just want to quickly mention here that instead of manually adding our bend markers, we can have Studio One analyze our audio, and it will add markers itself automatically. So this track is selected here. Let's go ahead and be sure that this event is selected, whatever you want to have Studio One analyze. We'll come to the top here and click on Analyze. Now we can see that it has added bend markers automatically, and these are going to be here based on the threshold. We can see that that's 80%. So if I were to click, hold, and drag and take that down, we can see that we can kind of remove some of those markers out to get it to be more to our liking, okay, more or less sensitive. And then once we've added those markers, or once Studio One has added those automatically, we have a couple of actions that we can make use of here. So we can actually slice at the location of those bend markers. So that's what it's on by default. If I click on Apply, now we can see that our audio event has been sliced. We will undo. Now, if we click on the downward facing arrow here, we can choose Quantize. And then when we apply that, our audio is going to be quantized based on our bend marker locations and the setting for our quantized value here. So I'll go ahead and click Apply and just take note of our event. And we can see that our audio has then been quantized to the grid based on our 8th note setting. And you can see that that audio is being stretched or compressed based on the color here of our waveform. Let's undo. Now, lastly, we're going to take a look at the strip silence panel. And then again, this is another one that I'll do a dedicated video for, but just so you're quickly aware of how you can make use of this. So you may have a vocal recording of a singer or another instrument, and we can see that we have some areas here where I'm not actually speaking. And in these areas, there may be room sound, or there may be other noises or other instruments that are bleeding into this sound. And maybe you want to clean that up. Now, we could, of course, use the split tool and cut and remove those. That would take forever. And we could also use the smart arrow tool here and highlight areas and press delete to remove those out, as we've already seen at the beginning of the video. But the strip silence panel is going to make this process automatic. So again, I'll select the event, and we have various settings where we can really tell Studio One what the threshold should be in dB for the open and close, and how sensitive it should be to detecting the quiet areas. I'm just going to leave this on the default, and we'll talk about all of this in a later video. But if I leave these on the default, and if I click on Apply, then we can see that it has detected those quiet areas and removed them completely. So that's 1,000 times faster than manually removing the silent areas yourself. Okay, so these are all the various ways that you can go about editing your audio within Studio One. I hope this video has been helpful, and I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Take care.